Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is part one of a playlist that's about revisiting the scriptures that I talked about in my original and first playlist, Illuminati playlist, where I did a factual presentation and I talked about very interesting things. And I didn't go that much into scripture. If I'm not mistaken, I read the whole book of Revelation in several parts. We'll get to that later. In part 4, I talked about how the false image of Christ was Mithra and Serapis and all these pagan images, right? And I also talked about how there was sun worship. Some people interpret the Bible as sun worship, right? And the video was a little off, but it more or less was the right idea, okay? That Christianity uses the sun as a symbol of God and the bridegroom. So in a sense, it is sun worship, but it's not pagan sun worship in terms of worshiping the sun as if it's magically God or something. So in part 124, I talked about Mark 5 and Mark 6. Okay. And I talked about how it was a mark key. Okay. Now, let's go over Mark 5 verses 1 through 20 in this series, touch on the other section and the other section or two, and then let's wrap this up and get into Mark 6 in the next video. So you know that I've been talking about this. I made the series from 2009 to 2012. I was working on other series at the same time, and I was also unfairly detained by police and, being covertly drugged and put on psych meds and so on and so forth unfairly. And in recent years, I've interviewed people, including mental health affiliated people and a psychologist, and they agreed that it wasn't fair for them to do that and there's nothing wrong with me and so on and so forth. And someone who at the time knew me better than my own family knew me, and they said that I'm the most normal person they know. So that's been overkill, plus the 24 witnesses to the psyop against me. It's been overkill that there's nothing wrong with me, and obviously there's not. I'm the most normal person ever. In fact, the word moral is scrambled into the word normal. Pretty straightforward. So Mark 5, Jesus restores a demon-possessed man. We're going to connect this to the greatest commandment, John the Baptist beheading, some stuff in Revelation I'll touch on quickly eventually. Also Matthew 24. Okay, and when we've done that, you'll see that I was right to put that in the playlist and to try to point people to those chapters so they would correct their mistake. Okay, keep in mind there's nobody on the planet right now who's doing the right thing, who zooms in on details super tough. So my method has always been to kind of get to the essence of things, talk about some details, but I don't, read you the whole dictionary or something, right? I don't overkill the details. The people that do are like tree of knowledge people who want to impress people with their knowledge of things instead of with their character, instead of with righteous acts. Okay. Mark 5, Jesus restores a demon-possessed man. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. So again, you see how strength, right, isn't this divine attribute in terms of physical strength. Okay, Hercules isn't the main hero of God or something. He's a pagan demon. And so this person was like Hercules, maybe he was a fake hero, but certainly he had an impure spirit and he was an evil person. And he couldn't be restrained. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." So you see how Jesus is inclined to torture people. And the demon knew that, and he knew that he was the Son of God. Okay, he's inclined to torture the wicked. That's kind of God's way, right? When people do the wrong thing, they don't kind of enjoy life. They don't have a worthwhile life. They have fake, giddy, immature, fun, if anything, but they don't really have true happiness. And the word torture, right? The word torture is a play on words for torch, right? So the light that guides them is burning their soul, that Luciferian light, the theater arts, the propaganda, the psychology, the Western gibberish, for example. For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." So he's relying on his flesh-based strength, which is cultivated by a demon, and his name is Legion, right? The word legion is in the word religion, and Ra in Hebrew means evil, but Ra to the people whose story they copied means God, the sun symbolizing God, what have you. And it says in the Bible, "Woe to you who call good evil and evil good," and the masses of the Jews, right? They were doing just that. And you can imagine that the people who came up with the language, right, the literal language, not the spiritual language that's hidden in the Bible, but the literal language of Hebrew, what have you, that they were probably like the masses of Jewish people, right? And that's what it says in Jeremiah 8:8, right? The lying pen of the scribes. Scribes write things down. They're part of cults of people who came up with languages, they come up with new words, what have you. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so there's many, like gang stalking, like they're all teaming up against me, right? And I'm standing firm on my own 10 toes, and we'll get to that when we get to Matthew 24. And he begged Jesus again and again to not send him out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. Now, what are the odds that there was 2,000 pigs? Okay, so it's probably figurative, right? And we see that the number, right, Jesus feeds the 5,000 is coming up in the next chapter. Okay, there's numbers like that, right? Numbers is a book in the Bible. Okay, you have the 12 disciples. Okay, the 3 days, and the resurrection, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of coded stuff in here that has to do with the tree of the knowledge, which is not important. For example, my father never taught me much from the Bible. He said, "To the one who much is given, much is expected." Okay, he said things aren't in the Bible. The character is what you do when no one's looking. It's much of an act not to act as to act. And in a sense, the whole Bible is summed up in the scripture he was quoting when he says, "To the one who much is given, much is expected." So God gave you this life, the soul, in my case, the son of a brain surgeon, a brilliant person, so on and so forth, the son of God, and much was expected, much is expected of me. That's one of the reasons I make so many videos. Okay, it's one of the reasons I'm in the moral repetition of God, because that's what God requires. And God requires everyone to obey God through me and to be willing to die on the drop of a hat, right? A man has to be willing to face adversity, to stand on his own 10 toes. And a woman stands on hers or stands by her man and willing to die with him. And when you're Jesus, in a sense, every woman is my woman in a sense, because I'm Jesus. I'm the bridegroom. Before their husband's authority over them is mine. And they're supposed to rally and obey God and be morally precise. Okay? And obviously, I'm not referring to sexual immorality or any despicable stuff like that. Okay. So the herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Okay, so he was dressed in righteousness, I'd say, is the main interpretation there. He's in his right mind. He's now righteous, led by the righteous man, Christ. The most righteous. God, Christ, what have you. So they're afraid. Why? Well, you got to realize that these people aren't saved. Okay? They too were possessed by demons, and the demon was controlling them. It's like, your emotions. When you follow your emotions, they're worldly, they're beast emotions, they're animal emotions. We don't follow principles, so you're led by demons. So this person was led by a demon who might be, embodied by a hippo or a boar, A demon that is strong. And these people had their demons. Okay. And notice the impure spirit, right? It's not moral. It's not morally precise. It's not morally pure. It's impure. So it's a demon. And a demon is also seen as a skilled performer. There's circus strongmen, right? The circus is unfocused people, scatterbrained people, right? Circus versus focus is what I've said many times. Okay. So the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. And something like that has happened to me in my life, where people wanted me to get out of this city called Santa Cruz. People wanted me out of Santa Clara County, is what they were saying, at least, what the gang stalkers were saying. Why? Because they don't want demons to leave, because they want to abuse people in this sick, rape by deception society, where they worship Eros, a deity of erotic desire, and Psyche, a deity of psychology, theater arts, propaganda, Dionysus, a young Zeus, ritual madness, instead of worshiping God. They worship science and technology and falsehood and false idols. As Jesus was getting to the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Now the next section, I'm not going to read it, right? It's about Jesus raises a dead girl and heals a sick woman. So notice there's females. There's the strong argument being made, and the strength is defeated by the spirit, right? The flesh-based strength, okay? Like my martial art argument, right? Focus more on intensity in its repetition versus them being trained by science and what have you, and falsehood. And there's all kinds of conservative and LGBT sexual arguments that are made. And LGBT people basically control the nations of the world, right? If you look carefully, it's LGBT-themed cultures. That includes conservatives who tend to try to look more straight-looking than other people, but their spirit is not thinking straight. It's LGBT. That's why the Jews, who are said to be in the spirit of the devil and mislead the world, are said to be called the people of Sodom. So how you raise your girl, right? Raises them from the dead, how they should be raised in the spirit of God. And healing a sick woman, right? Females are sick. That's why they're shunning me. That's why they're not obeying God through me. Okay. So what did they have to do to be healed? They had to submit to Christ. He goes there, and it's symbolic of them submitting, their family submitting and admitting. Okay, we'll get into Mark 6 in the next video.